The final domino in the story of Concord has seemingly fallen, but at the same time, I think this is PlayStation's biggest failure to date. But let's break that all down. Up next. What's going on, guys? It's Kalo, and I'm here to give you the lowdown on all things gaming. And if you're new here, feel free to subscribe to this channel for weekly video game news content. Drop a like on the video, and welcome to the Level Up. So, it looks like we reached the final chapter in the world of Firewalk Studios and Concord. As we all know by now, Concord was this live service hero shooter that was ingrained in this new initiative that Sony looked to push through. And that was a plain failure of a push when you come down to it, and this has to do with multiple attempts at live service titles like Foam Stars, Destruction All-Stars, and of course, the matter at hand today, Concord. We've seen and heard the numbers surrounding Concord in its release, barely sniffing around 700 concurrent players on Steam. And the rest was history. A mere 10 days later, the game was shut down itself, and Sony even went as far to remove the game entirely from libraries of people who bought the game. That is going above and beyond. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but this is by far and away the biggest failure of a game I've seen in my lifetime. And it just so happens that story continued yesterday. This is where the news was broken by Bloomberg's Jason Schreier that Firewalk Studios is being shut down by Sony. Now I get this really doesn't come as a total surprise given the launch of Concord, but I think the real shock factor here lies in the fact of how quickly everything happened. I mean, the game launched, was killed within 2 weeks, and then 2 months later, the studio is gone. This is crazy. And that's a rapid change in pace for something like this. And might I add, this was a project that Sony sunk 7 to 8 years of development for, along with very valuable resources and time. Sony, in my opinion, is a top-tier gaming publisher, and to just go on and produce such an epic failure like this is pretty insane. The question I have that does remain here is, where was the quality assurance team in Sony, especially within this game's development? I am quite sure they had multiple times to turn back with this game, and as of right now, that all look to just be overlooked. There's also this rumor making the rounds that Concord cost nearly $400 million to develop, and apparently Sony seen this game and thought it was just so damn good, they had to outright acquire Firewalk Studios because, again, they thought this game was amazing. Now, I don't think the full blame goes on this studio entirely. I do think they were just listening to the corporate overlords they had in all this, and they were steered in the wrong direction. Sony's leadership at the time was Jim Ryan, and you know my thoughts on that man alone, but he's long gone from the company, and he had this wild vision of live service titles, and seemingly just left the ship right before it was about to sink. Sony even went as far to create a special edition controller, thinking this game would be a massive hit. And this is all despite gamers voicing their opinion on this game and raising the biggest red flag possible. This stuff is concerning because Sony greenlit everything behind this game, despite the multiple warning signs and, again, the brightest red flags. This gives me zero confidence in Sony now when scouting new IP. And this is all coming from an Xbox fan because I know for a fact Xbox sucks at a whole lot of things. Sony has historically struggled within the live service game realm with multiple blemishes on their resume. And I can honestly just hope and pray for a game like Fair Games to work out, because right now if I was that studio, if my game doesn't work out, I'm probably gonna suffer the same fate here. I mean, that just by itself is a horrible way to live when it comes to game development and your overall business model. Sony's leadership continues to have zero accountability, and that just seems kind of strange. What's not talked about enough is they closed this studio down a year after its acquisition. I just think that's in record time. This blunder of Concord is on them as well. This is the biggest flop in games we have ever seen. And somehow, some way, this took Sony's leadership by surprise. This proves one of two things, and at this point it may be both, which is equally as scary, if not worse. 1. Sony's leadership is just plain blind and doesn't see the big picture. Or 2. They are outright ignoring fans, which, if you look at other game industries, if you look at other developers, that has never worked in the past. This is also not factoring in all the smaller situations that have been bust under this regime. To that, I look at the cancellation of multiple live service games, and let's not talk about the PS5 Pro. And I didn't even touch on the fact that Sony's major first-party rollout was slowed down because they wanted to make more live service games, most of them of which have failed. You can't tell me if they took out a game like Concord or Foam Stars, or even Destruction All-Stars, and replaced that with a Jak and Daxter remake, or Sly Cooper one, or, if I'm gonna throw the bone here, let's get Bloodborne in that. Any of those games, I feel, in the grand scheme, would have fared a whole lot better. The only success in this approach was Helldivers 2, which, oddly enough, took them by surprise, which should even be more telling. Sony, as of right now, needs to give themselves a good look in the mirror and learn what they need to work on. And that's to listen to the fan base, do some quality assurance, because as of right now, if they continue in this direction, this is gonna get lower. But with all that being said, I'm gonna pass this one off to you guys. I apologize for the rant, but this stuff irks me. What do you think about all this? Am I going crazy? Is it just me? Let me know in the comments down below. But that about does it here. I've been KLO, I gave you the lowdown on all things gaming, and if you're new here, feel free to subscribe to this channel for weekly video game news content, drop a like on the video, and this has been the Level Up.